welcome to the Upshot, Multi-World Disc Golf podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm Charlie Eisenhood, I'm the publisher, and joining me is Josh Mansfield. And, we went from in-season tournaments, hype, money, and it's like gone. I've never seen it get this off-season this fast, ever. Like, you look around, you're like, has anything happened in the last 2 weeks of disc golf? Like, almost nothing. I mean, I think everybody needed a break, but man, it's like startling how quiet things have been after feeling like we could hardly even keep up with a twice-a-week show.
It feels like a ghost town of disc golf now. I mean, even the pros' social medias have gone pretty quiet. That everyone was ready for a break, and it just kind of disappeared for a little bit. I haven't even played that much disc golf over the past 2 weeks. Like, the season finished, and I was like, wow, I need a break, and I haven't even played. So it's been weird. That's for certain.
I haven't played disc golf in like 3 months.
And that's just tragic, Charlie.
I mean, it's tragic. It's tragic. And I can already anticipate the people coming into the YouTube comments and being like, this guy's a phony. Like, he doesn't play disc golf. I like to play disc golf. In fact, I have a little tournament coming up in a couple weeks. But I want, the reason I even bring this up is because I think I am not alone in the general situation of not playing as much disc golf lately. Now, if you live 5 minutes from a course, surely you've played more than I have. Keep in mind that living in New York City is not conducive to disc golf competition, especially as the light dwindles in the afternoons. But I think that we are seeing I think we've crossed peak disc golf market for a little while. I think we're coming over the top of the market cycle, Josh. And I kind of want to get into that on today's show because I'm seeing signs around that this is happening and that maybe our pandemic bump, which has been, extended well over since March 2020, over a year, basically a year and a half, I think it's done. Like, I know that's a little premature maybe to say because who knows what's going to happen with COVID. Like, if things start to shut down again because it's the winter and people are inside more, and then, like, who knows? You never really want to say that for sure, but I think we've seen the top. And I want to talk about the implications of that and why I think that that's true. And I promise I'm not overreacting to the fact that it's now the off season. It just seems like after many months of intense supply constraints and oversubscribed disc golf tournaments. I mean, remember back at the beginning of the spring, like, you couldn't even get into B tiers and C tiers. They were filling up in like 2 minutes. And I just think that, like, things have cooled off a little bit. Not just because it's getting towards the winter, but just it doesn't feel as insane as it has at any point in the last basically 2 years.
Well, and I'd be willing to argue as well that even if things do start to shut down to an extent, one, that shutdown is going to be occurring at the beginning of winter and not at the end of winter. So I don't think that is conducive to a spike in disc golf in a lot of states across the country, maybe in the South. Additionally, though, and the other thing that goes along with this is that I would imagine a shutdown, because we've done this once, I imagine a shutdown does not completely stop sports again.
For what it's worth, I don't really think that we're going to have another lockdown.
I don't either.
Like, I think we're basically done. I mean, I think, there are going to be places where things are worse because generally there are higher unvaccinated populations, and that means that more people are going to spread the disease around. But, like, we can't afford it, like, society can't afford it. And I mean, let's start to get into this topic a little bit. We talked last week Razor Claw 2s drop, and there's plenty of stock. Now, you can argue about why, but we come back today, and there are still 3,600 Razor Claw 2s in stock on their website. And there were, I don't know, 4,000 something when we did the show on Wednesday. I don't exactly remember, but, they've sold more, but there's still many in stock. Mm-hmm. And this is just not a scenario that we were dealing with in the middle of the year or, any time really since the last summer. Like, stuff was just instant sellout. Now, the prices have gone up. There is more stock. There's a lot of reasons that you could say this is happening, but the fact that they still have this many in stock, to me, is a signal, perhaps, that things are starting to cool. And you look around, and I just saw a comment from somebody on the Disc Golf Debate group. They said they're a retailer. I really should just pull it up and read it. So, but I'll just paraphrase it. Basically, it was like, I'm a local retailer. The demand for products has dropped precipitously in the last 2 to 3 weeks. And their speculation was that it has to do with the price increases on discs. And people feeling a little price fatigue because of disc inflation, disc price inflation. I mean, and it's not just the big popular Signature Series drops, Josh. We've seen stock prices go up at every manufacturer across the board, $1 to $2 a disc at least. Mm-hmm. And, you don't really find even base plastic putters for under like $12 these days, which, that's not that much money, all things considered, but they used to be like $8, not even that long ago. So I bought a 5-pack of Judges, base plastic Judges from DD, I think for $35. Now, this was in late 2019, maybe early 2020. Now, I don't know what the price is now. I'll go look. But, we're just seeing prices increase across the board, both because I think of demand increase, but also plastic prices have gone way up. And supply chain issues have caused increases on the price of shipping, delays in shipping. There's been a lot of issues for manufacturers in particular to have to kind of navigate, and that continues now, as we're also seeing broad-based inflation across the U.S. economy.
The other thing that I was watching during the spike in disc golf was you saw some manufacturers who just kind of weathered the storm. I think Innova really didn't answer any questions. They just kind of took the criticism and rolled with it. You had other companies who were like, we're buying a full new molding machine. We're going to invest in all this infrastructure and capital expenditures in order to increase our production and ensure that we can meet demand. And I think those manufacturers have to be sweating a little bit right now because those machines are expensive. That is a lot of money to invest into equipment. And the question I have now, because I agree, I think we've hit that peak. And the question then is, does the slow trickle away from disc golf, the decreasing demand, which we've talked about, come from a lot of things. It comes from the price, comes from the increase of inflation just generally in the U.S. economy. It comes from the fact that people now have other avenues in which they can spend their money because the pandemic is not limiting or creating those kind of restrictions. It's the off season now as well. So people have other interests and hobbies and holidays that they're going to be focusing on. So all of these things that kind of detract from disc golf right now, are those detractions going to outweigh natural growth? And natural growth I use as a term to express the growth that we saw pre-pandemic, right? Disc golf was growing. It was growing slower. And so the question now is, was that growth that we had a sustainable enough growth that we can continue to retain the levels of interest in disc golf where we're at now? Or do you think that we're going to have an actual net decrease between now and, say, March of next year?
Okay, so it's a great question. here's my general thoughts. I think that fundamentally, disc golf is not I wouldn't call it a highly social activity. That's not to say you can't go out and play with your friends and have it be a social activity. But there's plenty of people who play solo, and ultimately it's an individual sport, it's an individual game. And I think that people are clamoring for concerts, live sports, going to bars, going to entertainment where you're with thousands of people, because we missed out on that for 2 years. I went to the Knicks game last night. Ricky Rubio destroyed the Knicks. I don't understand it. Career high 37. It was insane. But it was a great game, and it was just great fun to be back in that setting where you feel comfortable again in a giant indoor space, having fun at the Mecca. And I think a lot of people are really clamoring for that. And that necessarily means you're going to spend less time doing other diversions, right? As I said at the start of the show, I've barely played disc golf lately. Why? Not because I don't want to. I've just been busy with other stuff. I've been going out with friends more often in the city. That's not something that we were doing very much, even just a few months ago, right? It's only since May that's really been an option. And people were still kind of being ooh, Delta, I'm not really sure how I feel about that. And so that's starting to change. Work has been way busier as a part, and that's very much connected to the fact that the pandemic has been waning. I think what we saw happen, Josh, is we saw very, very, very favorable market conditions for disc golf, right? There was a period of time where the only things you could really do was be in your house or be outside. And, going into the store or whatever, felt weird. I know this is not true for everybody, but a lot of people, and just there were not even options for entertainment in large group settings, right? You couldn't go to sporting events, but what you could do is go play disc golf. And so we had this incredible market conditions for pulling forward demand for disc golf. You imagine that the people who started playing disc golf during the pandemic, many of them may have ultimately been attracted to play disc golf in the future, but they started sooner because of the pandemic. And I think you also just got some natural, you're taking the natural growth and you're tacking on this incredible market dynamic where it's this is a thing you can do. It's fairly inexpensive, and you can go out with your family, you can meet up with your friends, and it can be a really great activity. I mean, it was probably my primary activity during the pandemic.
Oh, without a doubt. What about you, Josh? I mean, I was disc golfing 4 or 5 times a week during the pandemic.
I wasn't quite at that level, but I was playing multiple times a week.
Now you haven't played in 3 months.
And
right. Yeah.
Right. So, and I don't think I'm alone, and it's not I don't like disc golf anymore. It's just that there's other things to do. It's also getting towards winter. So you're not prioritizing going out and playing a round of disc golf when, you can go do the normal things that you do as well. So let me give you an example from the stock
before
market.
You do, real quick.
Okay.
There's one thought I have to go along with this. So you talked about people who were attracted to disc golf and were participating, right? These people probably bought starter bags. Some even bought maybe small backpacks with 8 to 10 discs, right? When I think of the equivalent, though, I think that level of engagement, and they were probably going, we'll say once a week, right? For new players, and maybe even more during the pandemic. I don't think that is typical level of casual disc golfer engagement. And I think that that's something that is easy to forget, because when you think, oh, it's a casual player, you still think, oh, so they play a couple times a week. They probably just don't play tournaments. That's in our disc golf brain, what we equate to a casual fan. That's not what a casual fan is. I think a casual fan and a casual disc golf player is probably the equivalent of me being a casual bowler. My wife and I go bowling for date night maybe once a month, sometimes twice. Like we've got a bowling alley close to our house. Tuesday nights are really cheap. I don't own any equipment, and disc golf's cheaper. So maybe I own, 2 or 3 discs. It's something I do occasionally. That's what I imagine a casual fan as. And I expect people who got really engaged during the pandemic, I expect some of them to drop to that level in terms of disc golf.
Yes. This is a key point, and I appreciate that. Before I talk about the engagement level thing, it will change your life to get your own bowling ball.
Okay.
I bowled in high school, and I got my own ball, and you
right.
just trust me on this. They're not expensive. Get yourself a bowling ball. I'm sure the prices are low because nobody was bowling during the pandemic. And
I thought the sound of that chip hitting
you get custom finger holds with the little pieces of rubber in there so you can get spin on the ball. Just take my word for this. Don't use the alley ball. Get yourself a ball. If you get into it, you can buy yourself shoes. But until then, just use the alley shoes. And it's just it's worth it 100%. Engagement, yes. So this was a time where it would be easy to get obsessed with disc golf. Not everybody is going to maintain that, right? I'm not saying disc golf is a fad that's now going to burn off and die. No. But I do think that we had more people than normal very invested in disc golf, and not everyone is going to be able to sustain that, right? The people listening to this show, I mean, you're hardcore, right? If you listen to this, you're probably not somebody who's just playing once a week. And so I'm not really talking about you, but the people who were maybe playing multiple rounds a week are going to start playing once or twice a month, and maybe they stop watching YouTube and they
the buddy from work you got engaged is not going to keep playing with you every week.
So and that's just how things go. That's just how things go. And I don't think disc golf is going to drop off. I don't think we're going to see negative participation rates over the next year or two, but I think we're going to see plateauing. I think we're going to see I think I talked about this maybe a month or two ago, like a period of consolidation where like there isn't a ton of growth, but like we're starting to, kind of develop the infrastructure needed to support a new higher base. And that's what's been going on, right? Think about all the changes, manufacturers adding capacity. We've had, more courses getting built. We've had more tournaments than ever this year. More PDGA members than ever this year. The PDGA has made a lot of changes in order to support that. They're hiring, right? There's a lot of things that are really positive. But what it's going to be is we're not just going to stay on this trajectory where everything is crazy, crazy, crazy. Like if you go on to websites for manufacturers, they got discs in stock. We're past the everything is out of stock phase. And I think that, part of that is price, but part of that is also just a lot of the demand has been filled at this point. All those new players have their discs. Now they don't need as many new ones. And we're not going to be adding players like we were last winter. Last winter, people were still just playing disc golf. I was, because you couldn't do much inside. So now people are going to be like, I'm going to watch football. I'm going to go to the bar. I'm going to do these other entertainment activities that I have. So stock market. We are seeing this same dynamic play out in the stock market. Peloton. I bought Peloton stock after their commercial that was a disaster. And like their stock price tanked like 8% because of this commercial that people hated back at the beginning of 2020. Now, I just happened to make the world's best time to trade to buy Peloton stock. And it like, I don't even know, 6 or 7x from there. And it started to come back down, and I sold my position maybe 6 months ago or something. And they just came out with their latest quarterly earnings, and their stock dropped like 40%. Because basically they were like, we were wrong. Like our revenue guidance for the rest of the year, we're revising it lower. people are not buying Pelotons as much, Josh, because guess what? There's a lot of people who bought them during the pandemic because they couldn't go to the gym and they wanted to like do the cool thing with their friends, but the only cool thing to do with your friends in the workout space was Peloton. And now they're going back to spin class at the gym or Equinox or whatever else. So, I mean, we've seen at-home stocks like Zoom and Peloton and all of these, you know, things that were just booming during the pandemic really crashing back down to earth. And meanwhile, Live Nation, the concert company, massive stock growth, like 30% in the last couple of weeks because their earnings were great and there's all this demand for concerts. You name it. You know, I have Airbnb stock. They just had their best quarter ever. And like travel stocks in general are just flying up because not only have they done well over the last 3 months, they're also projecting incredible growth from like all of the international travel that's about to pick up again. So disc golf is a Zoom, is a Peloton. Like it is a thing that got huge during the pandemic because of the conditions. And now we're entering a space where it's going to be back on the trajectory that it was on before. And that's not bad. It was growing. It was doing great, but it's not going to be like this insane, everything is just like skyrocketing upwards anymore. I think we have to reposition ourselves for that.
I think the biggest question I have right now are for manufacturers who popped up during the pandemic. There are several that got released and started their companies during the pandemic. And I wonder to what extent are the demand for niche manufacturers like that going to be existent when the demand can be fulfilled by Innova, Discraft, MVP, Discmania, etc. Because I think you're right that not only you're right that in terms of actual engagement by the amount of engagement by an individual person, I think that will probably decrease on average. While the numbers may stay the same, it's interesting to know if these manufacturers predicted their growth off of pandemic numbers, and that's how they did revenue projections, or if they predicted it based on what 2018-19 trajectories were. And again, I think I'm 100% in the same boat as you. I think that injection of a huge number of fans in disc golf put us in a good place where we may have slightly higher growth numbers than we did in the past, because disc golf is largely a word of mouth game. I mean, that's how it expands. You tell your buddy about it.
Sure.
You tell your friends, and that's how disc golf grows. And so just by the sheer number of people that are now participating in the sport who are probably going to tell their friends, there are more now than there were in 2019. And given that that's the case, I would expect maybe we're 0.5% or 1% higher in terms of growth than we were pre-pandemic, once those levels kind of settle out a little bit. But that is still good. I mean, we're here talking about how disc golf is no longer going to enjoy that enormous growth. Sure, that's disappointing. I wish disc golf could continue to grow at the rate that it was, but it's still a great thing for disc golf, the way that it was able to skyrocket during the pandemic, and I think we'll continue to benefit from that in years to come.
Yeah, and you know, I was looking at some stats because, you know, I don't want to just conjecture blindly. You know, the disc golf subreddit has been growing at a very steady clip. And I mean, you can literally see in the lines, if you go to subredditstats.com and you put in disc golf, you can see the kink in the chart when the pandemic hits. And like suddenly the growth of the subreddit, which is obviously a proxy for the growth of the sport, snaps to a higher, you know, linear trajectory. And I think we're starting to maybe see signs of this chart starting to level off a little bit and fade towards a derivative of zero. I think that it's, you know, the sport is still growing actively right now. And by the way, my $35 5-pack is now $45.
So $2 a disc.
$2 a disc, which, you know, I looked up Discraft's website, current prices versus prices from end of 2020, November 1st, 2020. So basically 1 year ago today, or more or less. And prices on more premium plastics are up $2 a disc, basically across the board, since 1 year ago. And don't forget, 1 year ago, we were still in the midst of like insane demand crunch. So I think, how is the macro inflation that we're seeing, at the grocery store and at the gas pump and everywhere else, that's obviously hitting disc golf. Plastic prices are at basically at all-time highs, although they've come down over the last couple months. Are we going to see disc prices start to drop? Normally, when you see prices rise, they are sticky and they stay high. Then again, maybe we see manufacturers say, maybe $29.99 is a little too much for a signature disc. Sex and Firebird sold like crazy this year. They're $25. I don't know that there's necessarily a right or a wrong price, but when you're talking about a disc that costs $4 to make at the most, like, asking $30 for that, I mean, that's a pretty insane markup. And, people are only going to have some amount of willingness to pay that. And I think maybe we're seeing the high end of the market. But, like, it's just really interesting to see how disc golf is like fitting into these overall macro conditions. And I don't know what that's going to mean. Will DGN subscription growth continue on a rapid pace next year? Are we going to see a drop off in the amount of people who want to sit and watch disc golf? I don't know. I mean, I don't expect to see big drop offs in participation, but I do think that the overall level of engagement is likely to probably take a little bit of a step back, and that could be something to pay attention to in the media world as we kind of like look forward into 2022.
My wife and I watched Shark Tank, and so when you talked about the profit margin, I was just thinking, someone presenting their disc golf and then being like, so what's the profit margin on this piece of plastic? And then being like, it's 6 times cost of production. People are going to pay 6 times for this Frisbee, what they cost to produce it. And they're like, what's so special about this Frisbee? It's like, it's a Sexton Firebird. That's just how it is. People pay anything you want for it.
We put a different stamp on it.
It's got a cool Firebird, you see? It glows in the dark. Look, turn out the lights. Hey, back there in production, turn out those lights real quick. I think you're right. I think that it's a lot of disc golf markets are going to have to be asking themselves, one, how do they project their revenue? And 2, how are they then going to adjust that? And what numbers are they going to go off of? Because I think that's the hardest thing. And I mean, I work in healthcare and in outpatient physical therapy. It was the complete opposite for us during the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic brought outpatient physical therapy to a near halt because it was only the most extreme. I mean, you just had your knee replaced. So the doc was like, I'm not putting a new one back in 6 months, go to physical therapy. But for people who had regular back pain or shoulder pain or what have you, no one's coming in. So ours was the exact opposite. I mean, we died during the pandemic, just went so quiet. And now our numbers are higher than they were pre-pandemic. And so when we're looking at budgeting and growth projections, we know that we're doing better than we've ever done before, but it's really difficult for us to create accurate revenue projections right now. And I think that's going to be the case in industries across the board, including disc golf, whether or not you were. And it's inverse problems. We're now dealing with we've got more demand than we had pre-pandemic. So how do we adjust for that? Do we need to hire more staff, or these growth rates really just a post-pandemic boom? And then on the flip side, you've got disc golf that's asking, are we going to be able to sustain the investments that we put in with the decrease in growth?
I mean, I think one thing that's going to happen, I mean, you just alluded to this, like we're going to see a lot of smaller, like got started in the last year companies disappear. There's not going to be enough room for those companies to continue to survive. Like for a while, you could sell discs because they were just, if you had something people wanted, it was going to sell 100%. And now manufacturers' websites have everything in stock. Like there's no reason for people to go hunting around for some random, discgolfbro.com to buy their disc. So we'll see. I think it's going to be very interesting. And I think a lot of people need to steel themselves, because what might happen, all this new capacity for all these manufacturers, they're churning out discs like crazy. And all of a sudden they're going to be like, oh my God, after 2 years of not having anything on the shelf, we suddenly have way too much inventory. And how the hell are we going to move all these discs? And you're going to see fat sales. I think we're going to see really attractive, like
mystery, like the
Black
mystery
Friday,
boxes,
mystery
the
box type
holiday
stuff
packs
this year. I think we could see that. Because the companies rightly jumped into overdrive to buy more injection molding machines because they were totally unable to meet demand. And now it's going to be like, wait a minute, do we need to be running 3 shifts? Do we have to make discs around the clock? Maybe, but I think there's a real good chance that like things are going to cool off quite a bit, and maybe there's been a little bit of overreach with pricing. And so something to keep an eye on. I think this is a very interesting time for disc golf, and it's almost, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are like, damn it, like I don't want there to be an off season right now. I wish we were not like in 3 months of a time when people don't really want to play. Because remember last year, you like, did we do Thanksgiving? I think we had 2 people over for Thanksgiving, and like we both quarantined for like 5 days or something. And Christmas we did at home. We didn't see family. And I know different people did different things, but like that was going to be the experience of a lot of people, that they weren't doing big travel during the holidays. And so what were you doing? I was playing disc golf. I probably played disc golf Thanksgiving that weekend. And this year I probably won't. I mean, maybe I will, but like it's just things are different now, and we're coming back to normalcy in society, which is awesome. But it does mean that there's going to be less disc golf happening. On that, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about what a year 2021 was for professionals when it comes to payouts and added cash. What could this mean for the future? A little more of a positive note here. So we'll be right back. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Pound guarantees all of their packs against defects in materials and workmanship for the lifetime of every pack. That's right, lifetime warranty. That's the kind of commitment they have to making a great disc golf bag. Go to pounddiscgolf.com to learn more about their great options. And by Diameter Apparel. We all know the difference that confidence brings to disc golf. When you're comfortable, you're focused and confident in your game. Diameter Apparel is for disc golfers who want to be comfortable during their casual, league, and tournament rounds. In fact, Diameter supplies teams and trophy jerseys for many tournaments and events. Made right here in North America, Diameter Apparel's designs stand out and will inspire your best performance. Diameter is breathable, Diameter is durable, Diameter is beautiful. Wear what the pros wear. Diameter Apparel. Go to diameterapparel.com to learn more. Welcome back to the Upshot. So, I did some research into payouts and added cash over the last few years, and particularly looking at 2021, where we really saw payouts go to, all-time highs. Obviously, the $250,000 purse at the Disc Golf Pro Tour Championship is the real headliner. But even if you look at other tournaments like the World Championships and Ledgestone, other big payout tournaments, they were all hitting new highs and more added cash than we've ever seen before. So if you take a look, I just want to throw this stat out there first and foremost. Every single Elite Series event in 2021 had more added cash than the average added cash amount from 2020. So if you average tournaments from last year, every single tournament on tour this year had more added cash than that average from last year, which I think is just an incredible statistic when you think about it, the fact that every single one got there. And I think this is an area of huge potential growth for disc golf as we see, sponsorship starting to feel like it's getting unlocked, and just the overall growth of the professional side of the game. Josh, what stood out to you from this article, which, by the way, you can find on
I think
disc golf?
What was most surprising to me is when you look at the tournaments in terms of like total added cash, it's really interesting to see. I mean, Ledgestone, for example, if you look at the top chart, Ledgestone is by and far the leader every single year by an obscene amount of money over the rest of the tour. And so it's something that to me points to what the future. I think Ledgestone is a good indicator of the future of what payouts look like for tournaments by and large. This is what the standard is going to be. It's going to be Ledgestone levels, Disc Golf Pro Tour levels. Those are going to become the standard. I don't think they're just anomalies. I think they're signs of what are going to come. And tournaments that, and we've talked about this in the past, but tournaments that do not do the work to get the sponsorships, to get the revenue, are going to find themselves falling off the tour very quickly. I think the work, though, is also something that you're going to have a combination of sponsorship help from the Disc Golf Pro Tour, the tournament director, but you need a tournament director or a kind of director of sponsorships, director of marketing, whatever you want to call it.
You need a salesperson.
You do. You have to have a salesperson. And Nate Heinold has a lot of connections and is a good salesperson for Ledgestone. But I think you need to have, moving forward, if you want to be on the Pro Tour, you need to have a director of sales that is just focusing on how do we get tickets sold? How do we get sponsorships? How do we make this an event that can compete financially with the rest of the tournaments? Because, as we've talked about, it's a little bit of a badge of pride when you have high payouts relative to other members of the Pro Tour. And it's something that I think Ledgestone has done very well and is an indicator of where other tournaments need to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be enough to just be a TD. Mm-hmm. You're going to need a director of ticket sales. Mm-hmm. You're going to need a director of sales in general. I mean, maybe that could be the same person, depending. This is business now.
Yes.
Okay. Disc golf tournaments before, I don't really think they were business. They were operations. It was just like, can we run this event in this place? We make sure we have the bathrooms we need, whatever. Now we're talking about, like, if you want to be on the Pro Tour, right? If you want to be a top level event, you have to like treat it like it's a business operation, where you're saying, here's our stats. Like, here, let me show you our pitch deck. Mm-hmm. Like, here's the people you're going to reach and how. Obviously, the Pro Tour is doing some of this work themselves, sort of for the overall tour, but individual events are going to have to face those same issues in a smaller scale sense. But I mean, here's some numbers. 2019, average purse on the Pro Tour was $45,000, a little over $45,000. 2020, $52,000. 2021, $71,000. So, and the numbers in 2019 were basically identical to 2018. So we saw like very, very slow, almost no growth in the first couple of years there, and then some acceleration into 2020, and then massive boost into 2021. And this is not counting for the majors. This does not include the Pro Tour Championship. This is just regular season Elite Series Pro Tour events. So I think that this, signals where we're headed, which is higher expectations. What is the minimum added cash going to be on the Pro Tour next year? I think that number was 25,000 this year, or thereabouts. Or I mean, it was at least 20,000, because Waco was 20,000. That was the lowest of the added cash numbers for the Elite Series. OTB, 25,000, and then that scaled all the way up. Idlewild had 50,000. Ledgestone had 75,000. So I think we could see added cash minimums reaching 30,000, potentially more in 2022. And, that's a lot of money that you have to find.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. The one thing I do want to add, though, is I think that this is something that is having trickle-down effects at other tournaments not on the tour as well. So 2 examples of this. First, we talked about the Lone Star Classic having, I believe it was $30,000 of added cash. I'd have to go back and look at the article, but it was close to that number.
I think that's right.
Because they said our goal is to work to get on the Pro Tour or a Silver Series. I mean, we want this tournament to get on the map. It's interesting then that the way that you do that now is just by having added cash numbers that literally beat Pro Tour events. I mean, they beat a lot of Pro Tour events, actually. I mean, there's many tournaments that did not have that much added cash. So that's a way that you get instant recognition. But even at a more local level, I attended 2 A-tiers this year, both in Southeast Idaho, run by players who played in each other's events, very close friends. I mean, we all know each other. In the second A-tier, the tournament director, so both of these tournaments were sponsored by a bank and an insurance company. So they got local sponsorships to do added cash. And the tournament director of the second tournament announced during the players meeting that the final payout was $100 more than the first A tier, making it the highest paying tournament in the state of Idaho history. It's something that is becoming a mark of a good A tier and a good tournament, is that they're getting cash for players. And I think that as we begin to see that being just a general attitude towards how we run disc golf, like you've talked about business, even at the lower level, that is something that shifts the way we think about tournaments. It shifts the way we think about payouts. It means that TDs get paid money, and they get paid, and good TDs get paid good money. It means that pros consider this a standard of tournaments that they're going to play at. And I think it's a way that tournaments then can get on the map and get on the radar, is if you're able to effectively attract sponsorships and money.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, by the way, the Lone Star Classic not going to be an A tier next year.
I don't think it was this year. It was B tier.
It was not.
Yeah, it was B tier.
But I mean, you thought they were trying to move up.
That's true.
Right?
They're not an A tier.
Open at Belton is back on the Silver Series. Lone Star Classic, not even in an A tier. Now there's rules, of course, about A tiers and locations and timing. Like you can't have multiple A tiers within a certain number of miles of each other on the same weekend. So I don't know if that had an effect. I have no idea what the plan is for the Lone Star Classic in 2022. Just noting that it wasn't on the A tier schedule that was released a week or 2 ago. I agree. I think that this and everybody wants to be the best, right? Everybody wants to be the biggest. Everyone wants to have the biggest payout. Worlds came out, biggest payout in the history of disc golf, and then the DGPT Championship, biggest payout in the history of disc golf, and we're probably going to get higher next year. It's going to be really interesting. People are going to everybody's kind of figuring out right now, how do we go back to the non-pandemic world? And disc golf is going to have to figure the answer to that question out as well. Mm-hmm. You don't just get to have rocket growth forever.
Yep.
And I actually I was talking to somebody at one of the manufacturers about the 07-08 recession and how there were a lot of people playing disc golf after that because nobody had jobs. So very different kind of environment, right? This time, a lot of people still had jobs, but they were working from home. A lot of people still working from home. We didn't even talk about that in our earlier segment, like the transition back to office work and how that's going to affect things. I mean, it's probably gonna, but that's going to be something to watch. But the point that this person from the manufacturer was trying to make was that there was a spike and then it came back down to earth. And that's probably what's going to happen here too. But maybe not in added cash.
I would imagine I cannot imagine that any sponsor who gave money for added cash this year out of the Pro Tour left feeling disappointed.
Sure.
I just don't think it happened. I don't think there was enough money given by any single sponsor for them to say, wow, that was not worth my money. If you show just pure views of the event or what have you, there's no way that's the case, which means at least for one more season, I think you get those sponsorships back.
And with more money attached.
Yes.
I agree 100%.
And so
I agree 100%.
I don't see this having the same decrease. Now, if the sponsors begin to feel the effects of the decreasing of the boom of disc golf, that's when you might have to start questioning whether added cash is going to be affected. But I think that is something that is going to have a delayed effect, where we had a successful year, so they're going to commit to a second year. If this next year still we don't have quite the fall off we are predicting here, then they probably come back for a third year. If in that third year it drops off, then it's year 4 that we're going to see the payout. So I would, if we have a severe drop off due to the pandemic ending, which I don't think is going to happen, but even if we did, I don't see the effect of that being seen in added cash for 5 years plus, which at that point, they may have so many sponsors diversified that it might not even be an issue.
It's people have recognized that disc golf is not just this like goofy game for pot smokers. It's like a thing that's pretty legit and has a lot of fans. And what that means is that like now it's been discovered, and now it just gets exponentially easier to do things like sell sponsorship packages. Even if we come down off the peak and there is a decrease in participation, the floor has gone from here to here, right? It's gone way up. And so even if we see a drop, we're never going to get back to the levels we were at the beginning of 2020. Like, that ship has sailed. Disc golf, still in its growth phase, going to continue to grow because it has great natural advantages. Even with the increase in disc prices, it's still pretty cheap to play, a lot cheaper than golf. Courses are mostly free. It's fun, and it's family friendly, and it's friendly to all age groups. I think that these are just huge basic fundamentals for why disc golf is going to keep growing. So I think people need to prepare themselves for how to kind of navigate this next year or two, but long term, investing in, capital and machines and stuff right now is the definite right play for the long term. So we'll be back with you on Thursday with another episode of The Upshot. And subscribers, we'll see you tomorrow for our subscriber bonus segment. You can become a subscriber and get that bonus segment every single week for less than $4 a month. discgolf.ultiworld.com/subscribe. No inflation here. None. Thanks so much. For Josh Mansfield, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long. We'll talk to you next time.